I came home from a 14-hour shift to find my clothes scattered across the lawn, drenched, twisted, stepped on. My mother stood on the porch, arms crossed, smirking like she'd won something. "You don't live here anymore," she said. But what if the house was legally mine? What if I had proof she didn't know I had? For years, I paid the bills, fixed every broken pipe, and handed over my paycheck without asking. Now they'd thrown me out like garbage. Did they really think I wouldn't fight back? This is the story of how I turned betrayal into power and made them regret everything. It was 2:03 a.m. when my phone rang. Not a message, not a buzz, a full call. My mother's name flashed across the screen, and despite the exhaustion dragging at my bones, I answered. She was sobbing. "Rachel, I'm in the ER. I think it's a stroke. I can't feel my arm." The words blurred into each other. Panic surged through me like electricity. I didn't ask questions. I didn't pause. I grabbed my coat and keys and was out the door in under a minute. The drive felt endless. Every red light was an enemy. Every second ticking on the dashboard clock was her life slipping away. I rehearsed what I'd say to the doctors, braced myself for sterile hallways and machines beeping next to a still, gray face. But when I ran up to the ER front desk and gave her name, the nurse looked puzzled. "No patient by that name," she said. I gave them her birth date. No match. I asked if maybe she'd been transferred. Still nothing. My voice cracked. My hands were trembling. I showed the call log on my phone. The nurse shook her head. "I'm sorry, miss. There's no one here by that name tonight." I sat in my car for 15 minutes, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing anchoring me to the ground. Was I losing my mind? Did I mishear her? Did she mean a different hospital? But she never answered my follow-up calls, never even texted back. That night, driving home empty-handed, I felt something in me shift. A whisper I had ignored for years finally screamed loud enough to be heard. "She's lying to you." It wasn't the first time something didn't add up. It was just the first time I couldn't rationalize it away. There were all the little moments I had brushed off before. My clothes mysteriously disappearing, only to show up in my mother's or brother's closets. Her insisting I never go into Dad's old study, even though he'd passed 3 years ago and I'd paid for the full renovation of that room. She claimed it was for her memories, but I'd once seen her lock the door when she thought I wasn't watching. She used to guilt me with things like, "I gave you life. The least you can do is help your family." Every time I questioned why I was the only one paying for everything, I'd convinced myself this was normal. Families are messy. Parents get stressed. I had always explained away her cruelty as tiredness, her manipulation as love, her disregard as just how moms show concern. But the hospital lie shattered that illusion. A week later, I received an alert from the bank. A large transfer had been made from the joint account Dad set up for me before he died, an account I hadn't touched in over a year. When I logged in, the history showed that 2 days earlier, $1,480 had been transferred to a personal account under my mother's name. I froze. My father had left that money for me. It was supposed to be for emergencies, tuition, something meaningful. I had no memory of authorizing any transfer, no notifications, no confirmation texts. I clicked on the transaction and saw it, my signature, perfectly replicated, down to the slight tilt in the R. My mouth went dry, my vision blurred. I stared at it like it would morph into something else, anything else. Did I sign something I forgot about? Was it a form I'd been rushed to sign after Dad died? Or had she forged it? I forwarded the file to myself, then opened my email app to check previous messages. As I scrolled, I noticed something else, a previous transfer. 3 months ago for $7,000. Also signed by me. I thought back. That was the month I'd asked Mom if she needed anything, and she swore she was managing fine. She even made me dinner and said she'd started budgeting better. That lie had tasted like home-cooked stew. A pit formed in my stomach. I was standing in the kitchen, staring at the screen, when I heard her laugh from the living room, watching some game show with my brother, completely carefree. Like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't just stolen from me, lied about a stroke, and ghosted me at 2 a.m. I closed the laptop slowly, breathing hard. My heart pounded in my ears. Had this all been a long game? Was I just a bank account with a heartbeat to her? My phone buzzed with a new email from the bank. Attached is the notarized signature form for your records. I opened it, and there it was. Same signature, same slant. But this time, there was a timestamp. Dated the exact day I was working a 14-hour audit shift, with proof I'd logged into work systems from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I couldn't have signed it. I didn't sign it. The rain wasn't heavy, just enough to soak the edges of cardboard boxes and turn my shoes into sponges. I stood at the edge of our front lawn, my front lawn, watching my clothes, books, framed photos, and even toiletries scattered like trash bags after a storm. My suitcase lay open, its zipper busted, bras and socks spilled across the wet grass. My favorite coat was flung over a bush, its collar soaked and sagging. I looked up. The porch light flickered, casting a dim glow around her. My mother. Standing on the porch in her robe and slippers, arms folded, expression blank but satisfied. "I told you," she said coolly, "you don't belong here anymore." The words didn't sting as much as the calm in her voice. Like this wasn't cruel. Like this was natural. I didn't speak. Behind her, I saw the curtain shift. My brother, of course. I caught a glimpse of him holding up his phone, probably filming, grinning like a bored teenager at a prank. He was 29. A few seconds later, I felt my phone vibrate in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. Instagram notification, tagged in a story. I clicked. The video started with a pan across the lawn, zooming in on my soaked underwear. His caption read, "Taking the trash out. Finally, dat took your freedom." I couldn't breathe. My ears rang. I imagined friends, coworkers, random acquaintances, watching that clip and believing it. No context, just an image of a woman kicked out of her home like garbage. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I didn't even cry. I stood there, letting the drizzle blur my vision, letting the moment brand itself into my memory like a scar. Then I slowly reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, not to call anyone, just to record. I lifted the camera, pressed record, and captured the scene. The clothes, the porch, the smirk, the soaked earth swallowing pieces of my life. I said nothing, just held it for 15 seconds. Then I turned it off. Later that night, after I packed what I could into my car, quietly, without help, I drove to a motel on the edge of town, one of those places with vending machines that never work and fluorescent lights that hum just a little too loud. In the motel room, I sat on the bed and stared at my reflection in the black TV screen. There was no rage left, just exhaustion. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out the black envelope, the one I'd kept sealed for 2 years. Inside was the deed to the house. 2 years ago, just months before his death, my father had called me into his office. He'd looked thin, fragile in a way that frightened me. "I'm not putting this in a will," he'd said. "I don't trust your mother to respect it. She'll contest it, she'll twist it, she always does." He'd handed me the papers. "This house is yours now. I've already filed it with the county. Don't tell them, not yet. Use it when you have to." I'd been too emotional at the time to think about what he meant. I'd shoved the envelope into the back of my file drawer and never touched it. Until now. I spread the documents across the motel desk. My name, bold and clear, was printed under legal owner. The transfer was notarized, dated, sealed. They had no idea. For all their smugness, their schemes, their hashtags, they were squatting in my house. And they just handed me the moral high ground on a silver platter. I didn't sleep that night. I kept rereading the documents, imagining scenarios, thinking about legal angles, media backlash, every possible path forward. But by 6 a.m., I had decided on the simplest one. I drove back. Not to move back in, but to deliver. They were still asleep, apparently. The lawn had been cleared, probably by the rain or neighborhood complaints. I walked up to the front door, slid the envelope through the mail slot, and knocked once, hard. No screaming, no revenge speech, just paper. By the time they opened it, I'd be gone, but not gone for good. They'd have the whole day to wonder what was inside, to guess, to panic. And when the truth hit them, it wouldn't come from a courtroom or a lawyer. It would come from me. The house was quiet, too quiet. It was the kind of silence that made you question what had ever been real. I sat cross-legged in the far corner of my old bedroom, a place I hadn't truly occupied in years. Dust settled in the corners, and the scent of my father's cologne lingered faintly, like a ghost that refused to leave. That morning, after they found the deed, I came back, not to talk, but to retrieve. While they were out, probably meeting with someone to figure out how to cover their tracks, I entered the house using the spare key my father had hidden beneath the porch stone. I took only one thing, the small black camera I had tucked discreetly between the books on the living room shelf. It had been recording for 3 months. I downloaded the footage to my laptop, skipping through hours of mundane chatter, arguments over grocery bills, and late-night movie sessions. But around the 26th hour, I hit gold. My mother's voice came through the speaker, sharp and cold. "And she's nothing but an ATM that walks and breathes. She thinks we actually need her here. I let her stay because she paid the damn bills." Then laughter, my brother's voice. "We should have kicked her out last year." I felt my fingers curl into fists. I didn't cry, not anymore. I was past heartbreak. This was confirmation, proof that I had not imagined the manipulation, that they had seen me as a wallet, not a daughter. I uploaded the audio to a voice-to-text AI tool, one I'd found through a subreddit for journalists. It wasn't just transcription. It analyzed tone, intent, repetition of coercive language. The report flagged 87 instances of emotional control indicators within that one conversation alone. Still, that wasn't the twist that shattered me. While pulling old files from the safe under my father's desk, a place my mother had sealed off as grieving space, I found a flash drive taped beneath the drawer. It was labeled in my dad's handwriting, just in case. I plugged it into my laptop and sat still, barely breathing. It was a recording, his voice, weak but clear. Rachel, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry. I always knew your mother would go too far. She's already tried to forge your signature on the savings account. I stopped it, but you need to be careful. She's done it before. With my mother, with your aunt. I hit pause. My throat tightened. The man I had grieved silently for years had left breadcrumbs. He'd known. He hadn't been fooled. I pressed play again. I've secured the deed in your name. Use it when she tries to take what's yours. And Rachel, don't let them turn you into the villain. You're not cold. You're just finally awake. I couldn't move. My knees pulled to my chest, my chin resting on them. My father's voice was both a wound and a balm. I played the file twice more. Then I backed everything up. Audio, video, transcripts, legal documents, and uploaded them to a secure drive. It was time to stop being alone. I reached out to 4 people. First, Marlene, my old college roommate, now a family attorney. Her response was immediate. Send everything, I've seen this before. Second, Leo, my financial advisor. He offered to pull every transaction from the past 5 years, cross-reference signatures, and flag irregularities. Third, Vanessa, my childhood best friend turned investigative journalist. When I sent her the clip of my mother calling me an ATM, she simply replied, "Say the word, I'll help you tell it right." And finally, my father's sister, Aunt Joyce. The family had always painted her as the drama queen, the troublemaker. But I remembered how she used to whisper to me, "Blood doesn't equal loyalty, sweetheart." When she heard my voice, she cried. Then she told me the truth. Years ago, my mother had manipulated my grandmother into signing over her estate, promising to manage it responsibly. Within months, the property was gone, the money siphoned, and Joyce was painted as the jealous spinster who tried to steal from her own mother. My mother had done this before. She hadn't just hurt me, she had a pattern. I stared at the call screen long after we hung up. This wasn't just personal anymore. This wasn't a family fight over money or space. This was a legacy of theft, control, and lies. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. My team was ready. My evidence was solid. My resolve was no longer born from rage, but from clarity. And this time, they wouldn't see it coming. The invitation came via group text, sent from my mother's phone, phrased as if nothing had ever happened. Christmas Eve dinner, 6 p.m. family only. Let's come together. She was staging a reunion, but I knew the truth. It wasn't about healing, it was about control, optics, a final act to solidify her version of the story before I could tell mine. So I said yes. I arrived at 6:04, dressed in navy, no makeup, hair tied back, calm, precise. I carried one thing, an iPad tucked beneath my coat. The house was immaculate. Lights strung around the porch, wreaths on every window. Laughter spilled from inside, uncles, cousins, the clang of serving spoons. My mother greeted each person like royalty, a glass of wine in hand, cheeks flushed like she'd been crying happy tears. She saw me and smiled, arms wide. "Rachel, you came. I told them you just needed space." Aunt Joyce caught my eye across the room and gave the smallest nod. Dinner passed with forced warmth and empty questions. I played along, I passed dishes, laughed when prompted. But inside, I was counting down. When dessert was served, I stood. I held up my glass and tapped it lightly with a spoon. "I'd like to share something," I said. The room quieted. A memory, actually. A piece of family history. One we've all been left out of. I reached into my coat and pulled out the iPad. The screen glowed to life. 3 months ago, I placed a hidden camera in this house, not out of malice, out of necessity. My mother stiffened. Her smile twitched. I tapped play. The audio played through the speakers, her voice unmistakable. She's nothing but an ATM. I let her stay because she paid the damn bills. A ripple moved through the room. Forks froze midair. My cousin dropped his wine glass. Then came my brother's voice. We should have kicked her out last year. The sound of their laughter filled the room, louder than the fireplace crackling behind me. I paused the clip. Silence. No one looked at me. They all looked at her. She stood slowly. That's not real. That's AI. She faked it. I said nothing, just tapped next. This time it was worse. My mother's voice again, colder. I hated her since she was a child. She never listened. All she was ever good for was money. Gasps. Someone whispered a curse? Then the final line, my brother's voice, lower this time. If she ever finds out about the Panama thing, she'll lose it. I paused the recording. My mother exploded. Lies, all of it. You think you're clever? You think you can destroy me with your little videos? She lunged toward the iPad, knocking over a vase in the process. Water soaked the tablecloth. She grabbed a bowl and hurled it against the wall. No one believes this. No one. No one moved, not even my brother. She turned to Aunt Joyce, desperate. You know this is fake. Tell them. But Joyce only stood. She did the same to me 30 years ago. Took everything from our mother. My mother screamed. I stepped forward. There's more, I said. The account's in Panama in your name. The money transferred over 2 years. I have the records. She staggered back, clutching the table. Then she dropped, flat onto the floor, eyes closed, no sound. Someone gasped. A cousin rushed forward. Is she? I knelt beside her, checked her pulse, steady, faking it. Of course. I stood and turned to the room. I'm sorry you all had to find out like this. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to air dirty laundry, but I couldn't keep letting her rewrite the truth. I looked at each face, some still in shock, some ashamed, a few angry, but not at me. I allowed this to go on too long. That's my fault. My voice cracked slightly at the end. For the first time in years, I let them see me shaken. Not because I was weak, but because I was done pretending I didn't bleed. Behind me, my mother stirred on the floor, groaning as if coming out of a trance. I didn't look back. I turned, walked toward the door, and let them decide what they believed. I didn't expect it to go viral. I uploaded the clip because I needed to breathe, because I needed a space that wasn't soaked in manipulation and gaslighting. The caption was simple. This is what my mom did to me. The video began with me standing in the rain, my clothes scattered across the lawn. Then the audio played, her voice, my brother's laughter, the confession about Panama. By morning, the video had 800,000 views. By noon, 2 million. By the time I went to bed, 10 million people had heard my story, and they weren't silent. I woke up to thousands of comments, people sharing their own stories of being used by those closest to them. Strangers offered support, lawyers volunteered advice, survivors of narcissistic abuse messaged to say they saw themselves in me. For the first time in years, I felt seen without being used. But the consequences weren't just emotional. Reporters started calling. News outlets covered the story with headlines like, "Daughter exposes family's financial betrayal in viral video," and hidden recordings spark legal investigation into alleged inheritance fraud. Within a week, a formal investigation was launched into my mother's financial activity. Not because I asked for it, because whistleblowers came forward, a former banker, a neighbor, even someone from the church where she used to serve on the financial board. The house, legally mine, was placed under official review for asset misuse. Not against me, against her. She couldn't claim victimhood anymore. The deed was public record. The forged signatures were traceable. The Panama accounts linked directly to her social security number. And my brother? He lost his job after his employer saw the video. Turns out calling your sister trash in a viral post doesn't align with company values. He messaged me once, angry, blaming me for everything. I didn't respond. For the first time, silence felt like power. But just as I began to feel the weight lift, I received a message that made my breath hitch. It was from a woman named Caroline. The subject line read, "We might share more than a last name." The message was short. "I saw your story. I'm sorry for what you went through. I think we might be sisters. My father, your father, same man. I've never spoken publicly about this, but your mother stole everything from my mom too. She ruined us. I was just a baby. She made sure I disappeared." I read the message 3 times before I could move. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. I replied simply, "Please, tell me everything." She did. Her mother had been my father's first love. Their relationship ended abruptly. Caroline was born, but he wasn't allowed near. My mother had threatened legal action, accused him of things I couldn't bring myself to type. She'd painted herself as the savior, the only real woman in his life. He caved. He disappeared from Caroline's life entirely. And now here she was, a grown woman, living quietly 2 states away, watching from afar as I exposed the same woman who had once erased her. "I watched your videos," she wrote, "and I saw the girl I could have been. I saw the woman I almost became." I didn't know what to say. There wasn't a word big enough for the grief of a life stolen, for the damage done long before either of us could fight it. I invited her to meet. We didn't talk about our mother. We talked about our dad. The good pieces, the few stories we both remembered. His laugh, his music, his kindness. She cried first, then I did. When I walked her to her car, she hugged me tight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for burning down the house I was too scared to touch." The days that followed were quiet, not in sound, but in stillness. No texts from my mother, no posts from my brother. The house remained mine, but I didn't move back in. I didn't need it anymore. One morning, I drove out to the cemetery, holding a single white flower. I found his grave, modest, clean, the stone worn from time. I stood there for a long time, unsure what to say. Then finally I spoke. "You were right. She did try to take everything, and she almost did. But I didn't run. I fought. I showed them who she really was. I didn't become her." The wind rustled the leaves above me. "I wish you were here to see it, to see her lose, to see me win. But more than that, I wish you were here to see me finally breathe." My voice cracked. I sat by the grave for an hour. No phone, no headlines, just silence. The kind that heals. The kind that doesn't feel like loneliness, but peace. When I returned to my apartment that night, there were no bouquets, no trophies, no standing ovation. Just a small handwritten note slipped under my door. From the neighbor's daughter. She was 16. "Thank you for telling the truth. My mom watched your video and finally left my stepdad. She said if you could do it, she could too." That night I cried harder than I had in months. Not because I was broken, but because I was free. The ocean smelled like salt and oranges when I arrived. A small town on the coast, far enough from everything familiar, close enough to feel like I hadn't vanished completely. The house was simple, white shutters, chipped porch steps, a kitchen window that looked out to the sea. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. Earned. Chosen. I sold the old house without hesitation. I didn't keep a single item from inside it. Not the dining table, not the curtains, not the framed photos that once hung on the hallway wall, now tainted with too many buried lies. I kept only the deed transfer form, filed and notarized, and tucked it in the back of a drawer where it would collect dust like a weapon I no longer needed. I spent my mornings in the garden, learning how basil thrived in morning light and how tomatoes were sensitive to wind. In the afternoons, I walked to the local market, greeted the same 3 vendors, slowly becoming more than just a new face. In the evenings, I cooked for myself. Real meals, with real ingredients, no frozen dinners, no takeout eaten over the sink. I lit candles, I played music, I sat at a table made for one and felt no lack. Every night before bed, I wrote. It started as a journal, then a blog, then a series of essays. I wrote about gaslighting, about invisible betrayal, about the kind of abuse that leaves no bruises but still breaks bones. I wrote about waking up, about choosing yourself, about how silence doesn't always mean peace, and speaking up isn't always violence. And people read it, slowly at first, then more. A community formed in the comment sections, women, men, teenagers, people who had spent years questioning their own memories, finally finding words that made them feel sane. It wasn't a following, it was a lifeline. 2 months after my first post, I received an email from someone at Netflix. They had seen the viral video, then they read the blog. Then they asked if I'd ever considered letting someone tell the whole story, on screen. I stared at the message for an hour before replying. Not because I was scared, but because, for the first time, I realized that this wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who needed it. I agreed to a call, then a meeting, then a contract. It was surreal, watching producers take notes on the trauma I had once buried under politeness and people-pleasing. They asked who I'd want to play me. I didn't know. Someone who can look like they're breaking, I said, but still know how to fight. The script was in development. The announcement hadn't gone out yet, but it was coming. And with it, the one thing I hadn't expected, fame. Not red carpets or paparazzi, but recognition, public eyes, judgment, applause from strangers, and criticism from those who still thought family meant silence. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I knew I wouldn't run. Instead, I used the momentum. I launched an organization, small at first, focused on helping women set and maintain boundaries after familial abuse. We offered free legal consults, partnered with therapists, ran workshops titled, How to Say No Without Explaining Yourself. I was in the room for every session. I wasn't the expert. I was the proof. Sometimes women came just to sit in the back and cry. No words. Just space to exist without being told they were dramatic, selfish, or too emotional. One girl stayed after the final session of the season. 17. Hoodie pulled over her head. Quiet. She handed me a note. No envelope, just folded paper. It read, Because of you, I packed a bag and left. I don't know what happens next, but for the first time, I know it'll be mine. I read it 3 times, then looked up to thank her, but she was already gone. I went home that night and stood on my porch, watching the moon reflect off the waves. The air smelled like salt again, but this time it wasn't sharp. It was soft, familiar. I closed my eyes and whispered into the dark. This is what freedom feels like.